I am Jose Ramon Perez Riera, and I am the Revitalization Coordinator for the FOMB. I'm here today to provide an update on our work in economic development. The board, through the fiscal plans, has supported initiatives, investments, and structural reforms as the foundation for economic growth. But as the executive director noted in his remarks, we must now go further. We started a process 6 months ago to go further, to deepen our work in the economic development. To date, we have engaged extensively with leaders from across the private sector, nonprofits, and government. We reviewed all available past or current planning efforts, and there are quite many. And we engaged in a rigorous analytical work to understand our economic drivers and our competitive positioning. Among our goals is to identify priority opportunities and initiatives that can help catalyze economic growth across Puerto Rico. We are equally focused on developing an approach that results in lasting impact. In doing so, we plan to build a process that allows for continuous updates as lessons are learned or as new priorities emerge. And we are very focused on developing an implementation approach with a bias towards action and results. In this presentation today, I will provide an update on the economic development plan in 3 different parts. First, I'll share an overview of the approach to developing the plan. I'll share how this effort has considered previous plans and how we expect this plan to be different by design, how we propose to take this plan forward. Second, I'll share an update on the findings to date. This will include a view on the historical economic performance in Puerto Rico and highlight early insights into the key strengths and challenges that we observe across the economy today. Third, I'll share how we plan to take this effort forward. Here, I'll highlight the emerging priorities. I'll also share how we plan to develop a foundation for implementation that will drive results through collaboration, engagement, but also through continuity and transparency. Let's start with an overview of the approach the development of this plan has taken to date. As a reminder, the FOMB, through the Commonwealth's fiscal plan, set the imperative to facilitate and coordinate economic development efforts in support of enhancing outcomes and growth. We have taken up this mandate to launch a broader economic revitalization effort focused on the design of an integrated plan for the economic development of Puerto Rico. As outlined in the fiscal plan, we hope and expect this plan to provide a roadmap for targeted investments and structural reforms that can help Puerto Rico accelerate its growth for decades to come. Our efforts to date further follow the direction of the fiscal plan by including extensive engagement with leaders across public, private, and nonprofit sectors to reflect the potential partners and actors in advancing these goals. We have worked in close collaboration and partnership with the government, primarily with the Department of Economic Development and Commerce. We have also worked closely with government leaders from relevant departments, including the Department of Labor, Healthcare, Housing, Infrastructure, among many others. To date, we have engaged with more than 125 stakeholder groups, representing over 30,000 voices in a variety of formats and different forums. We've logged nearly 900 hours of input and are grateful of the participation of many perspectives into the creation of this effort. We engage with subject matter experts, private sector leaders, and government agencies alike. And as I'll discuss, we view this engagement as simply a starting point, something that will continue to grow and evolve over time. Our intention is that this effort becomes the single most comprehensive community engagement effort in economic development in Puerto Rico's history. The process also undertook an extensive review of recent and historical economic development plans. We reviewed more than 150 plans and studies, including more than 40 economic and fiscal plans developed by the government since 1975, more than 80 economic studies created by industry associations, economists, and research groups, and more than 30 policy papers or studies on specific economic drivers like labor force or housing. Through this review, we quickly recognized that Puerto Rico does not have a shortage of plans or a shortage of good ideas. Rather, we face challenges translating these plans into long-lasting growth. We intend for this plan to design an approach to overcome these challenges. In our review, we noted that many plans have failed to meet their objectives because they are structurally unable to deliver on the results. The challenges that limited these previous plans include the following. One, a lack of continuity. When leaders or conditions shift, areas that require long-term commitment aren't sustained and progress gets lost. Two, poor coordination between government and the private sector. This coordination limits the ability to bring the best of each sector's respective expertise. Three, the negative impact of our political cycles. 4-year political time horizons can hinder programs that require commitment beyond these timeframes. Four, bureaucratic inertia, which can create challenges to execution. Five, fund mismanagement, where investment is often not aligned with the highest return or impact areas that need to be focused on. And six, limited accountability and transparency of efforts and results. We believe that this economic development effort should be built differently in order to have lasting impact by addressing all of these challenges. To do so, we have identified and are committed to finding ways in which this plan can be different, including the following. First, integrating this plan into the fiscal plan on an annual basis. This will allow for an evergreen plan that can adjust to the times and is insulated from changes in leadership or pressures of short-term political planning cycles. Second, positioning the private sector to act as change agents in order to foster plan continuity beyond the existence of the FOMB and help support coordination and implementation efforts. Third, prioritizing long-term enablers for example, workforce labor participation, energy reliability, healthcare, among many others. Many of these areas have the potential to drive the most value for Puerto Rico, but require planning and implementation that transcends a 4-year cycle. Fourth, establishing new governance systems for the plan's implementation. This will include setting targets for key initiatives and building capabilities to enhance execution. Fifth, leveraging the FOMB's ability to manage funding allocation and exercise oversight. This plan can develop an investment roadmap consistent with the fiscal plan that supports initiative owners to execute. And six, assigning specific cross-sector collaborators and creating public transparency to drive accountability for results. Let's now transition from our approach to some of the findings to date. It's important to review where we have come from before in order to set a view on where we have to go in the future. In this review, we note several periods in our history, decades if not longer, where economic performance in Puerto Rico, our growth rate, actually exceeded that of the United States overall. From the 1950s to the 1970s, we experienced rapid industrialization as we shifted from an agriculture to a manufacturing-based economy, led in great part, I would say, by Operation Bootstrap. In the 1970s and 1980s, after Section 936 was introduced, Puerto Rico continued to outperform the U.S. mainland. This was also a moment, however, that the United States economy started the shift from manufacturing to the services sector. Puerto Rico's economy did not make this transition at that time. When the phase-out of Section 936 started in 1995, the expected shift from manufacturing reliance did not take place, but the effects were not immediately felt. However, Puerto Rico began to rely on government intervention in order to maintain productivity and employment levels. Puerto Rico's public debt increased from $4 billion to $19 billion from 1995 through the year 2005. Over the last 20 years, Puerto Rico's economy has effectively stagnated, and this is also a period marked by economic shocks, whether the completion of the Section 936 phase-out, the 2008 financial crisis, Hurricanes Irma and Maria, the bankruptcy, and/or COVID. As we are now post-debt restructuring, Puerto Rico's economic indicators across population, employment, and productivity have begun to stabilize. The resulting picture of economic performance highlights the challenges and the imperative of changing our economic trajectory. Puerto Rico's economy has traditionally moved in lockstep, if not outperformed, the U.S. economy for sustained periods of time. We now seem to have diverged from the U.S. economy with a sustained period of trailing performance across key indicators. Puerto Rico's real GNP growth has lagged the U.S. GDP growth on average by nearly 3 percentage points per year since 2004. Employment growth has effectively been flat while increasing 20% in the United States, and population has declined by 14% since 2005. We realize that this effort comes at an inflection point for Puerto Rico's economy, but there is significant reason for optimism. Economic growth is not only an opportunity, it is an imperative given the current context in which we find ourselves. Puerto Rico's finances have stabilized, breaking decades of deficit spending, and the crushing debt has been reduced to sustainable levels. Economic development activity has expanded in Puerto Rico and requires new levels of coordination in our signature efforts, whether public-private partnerships, restructuring, reconstruction, or identifying how to respond to global challenges in sectors and in technology. We also know that there is an unprecedented level of federal funding, approximately $100 billion that's been allocated for Puerto Rico. Deploying these funds will require new levels of collaboration to generate the maximum benefit. We also recognize that partnership between FOMB and the government of Puerto Rico can provide more local capacity for economic development activities. And finally, the FOMB can allocate significant resources to an economic development plan that reflects the island's needs while also enhancing the adoption of the plan at all levels. This economic development plan aims to leverage this moment by implementing strategies that address both historical challenges and future opportunities, with the goal of creating a sustainable and inclusive economic model that will benefit all Puerto Ricans. As we have commenced the development of this plan, we designed a comprehensive framework to consider and analyze all aspects of the Puerto Rican economy. We have reviewed the core sectors of the economy, including production, consumption, and the knowledge-based economic sectors. We analyzed cross-cutting enablers such as infrastructure, healthcare, education, and public safety. We've reviewed economic policies, strategies, and planning efforts, including fiscal responsibility and key administrative processes. We have combined the thorough diagnosis of Puerto Rico's economy with our review of previous economic efforts and extensive community engagement to develop our initial insights. The diagnostic highlighted several foundational strengths that the plan should focus on and build from. First, we have many production and consumption sectors that are assets for our economy. Areas like biopharmaceuticals, medical devices, and tourism have been historic drivers of economic performance and are positioned to continue to be drivers in the near future. Second, there are strengths in several of our service sectors. These sectors, including financial services, insurance, and professional services, are high-growth areas globally. Third, we have pockets of high-priority talent with expertise and in-demand skills. Skills like biomedical sciences and engineering. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico has lower labor costs than all of the states in the United States, creating an attractive environment for investment. And we have a significant diaspora that we can also leverage to drive growth at home. Fourth, we have a high connectivity infrastructure supporting movements of goods and people across the island and to major international markets. Fifth, we have a growing startup ecosystem with robust levels of entrepreneurship. Among U.S. peers, Puerto Rico ranks 6th in startup density, defined as the share of total firms that are less than 1 year old. 6th is our attractive tax and incentives climate, favorable rates and attractive programs for key sectors, and a regulatory environment which is aligned with the United States. We also see, however, that for each of these strengths, there are associated challenges that we must address to unlock the next wave of growth. First, many of our key sectors have started to experience trailing performance. Historic drivers of growth, such as manufacturing, have slowed and now trail the U.S. rates of growth in GDP and in job creation. Second, our economy has underrepresentation in tradable services sectors. These sectors are drivers for growth across the U.S. and many economies globally, yet they represent less than half of the share of the economy relative to the U.S. This means that Puerto Rico risks missing growth waves like the tech sector or other professional and business services. Third, our shrinking population and labor force is straining the availability of in-demand talent, which can hinder industry growth. Puerto Rico's population has declined by 500,000 over the past decade, leading to significant labor shortages. Furthermore, our labor force participation rate stands at 46%, which is well below the 63% in the U.S. mainland. This gap is likely due to multiple factors, including a high prevalence of informal work and systemic barriers to employment. Retaining, reattracting, and reinvigorating our talent is a key enabler for future growth. Fourth, our infrastructure varies in its reliability. Power, transportation, and digital assets all lag on key performance indicators. Electricity is expensive and unreliable. Roads are under-maintained, and digital connectivity is not equitable. These challenges hamper the likelihood for companies to invest in Puerto Rico and hurt individual and business productivity. Fifth, we experience lagging innovation outcomes. Puerto Rico ranks 50th in the United States in venture capital funding per capita and 51st in academic science and engineering R&D as a percent of GDP. Six, there are challenges in the ease of doing business in Puerto Rico. We currently rank 65th in the world in the ease of doing business. Permitting takes about 160 hours and tax filings take about 185 hours on the average, and Puerto Rico ranks 143rd globally in dealing with permits and 161st in registering properties. These findings are meant to be an input in developing initiatives and investment plans to address key challenges and catalyze the next wave of growth. As we reflect on these findings and consider the path forward, we recognize there is significantly more work and collaboration that's required. While we have made great progress through the analysis and engagement, we are now ready to further prioritize, plan, and start to implement efforts. This shift will require additional stakeholder engagement, including public engagement, to test the findings and the priorities. Over the coming months, we will start to look toward the implementation of this new framework for growth, including establishing the project management structures to ensure the plan can be implemented effectively. The path forward will also start to prioritize the areas that we expect to be the highest impacts towards our growth goals. Several opportunities have emerged as priorities throughout our initial diagnostic and engagement. The priorities fall roughly into three categories with three main pillars in each of these themes. First, growing high-potential economic sectors. This includes revamping, attraction, and expansion efforts for our priority sectors such as biopharma, medical devices, tourism, financial services, and professional services, among others. We must also address the ease of doing business as well as continue to unlock federal support for economic growth. Second, boosting Puerto Rico's skills, labor force participation, and population. This includes growing, retaining, and reinvigorating our talent. We must produce more of the skilled workers that employers need. We need to address our lagging rate of participation, and we need and must continue to make progress on retaining, returning, and attracting our talent back to Puerto Rico. Third, investing in infrastructure and innovation to enhance productivity. This includes addressing the performance of our infrastructure assets to keep up with growing demands in the 21st century. We must also build on the emerging strength of our entrepreneurial system. And finally, we must further streamline government operations and service delivery. Through the Economic Development Plan, we have begun to identify strategic initiatives that Puerto Rico can pursue across these three themes, and we will further refine and prioritize these focus areas. As the identification and prioritization of initiatives continue, we also recognize that the Economic Development Plan is meant to be an evergreen effort. We have started by reviewing and building on prior economic development plans and undertaking a robust engagement process. As we look to the future, we will continue to evolve and refine this plan and continue to incorporate input from all stakeholders. Notably, we plan to work with the government based on their planning effort and jointly refine and identify priorities for inclusion in this economic development plan. We also recognize the importance of building the right infrastructure for implementation, including governance structures to ensure execution while allowing the plan to evolve as conditions change and lessons are learned. As mentioned in this economic development presentation, the plan will harmonize with the reporting and the refinement process of the fiscal plans. In doing so, the FOMB can create the plan's implementation as well as support continuity. We anticipate that each new fiscal plan will have initiatives and goals reflecting the economic development plan's priorities to drive economic growth for the island. Finally, as we look even further ahead, we are also committed to ensuring the sustainability of this economic development effort during and beyond the leadership of FOMB. There are several measures that we plan to take to ensure this continuity. We plan to identify responsible collaborators that are accountable for the success of specific initiatives. Most of these collaborators we expect to be outside of FOMB, both at the public and at the private sectors. We are also committed to building capabilities, equipping initiative owners to successfully execute on their goals and their plans. Finally, we plan to develop public-facing updates. We expect these will provide transparency and increase private sector and cross-government collaboration. In closing, I want to reiterate my appreciation of the Executive Director and the Board for setting the imperative to develop this plan and this initiative. I want to thank the hundreds, if not thousands, of stakeholders that have provided their time, their effort, expertise, and insight to this effort. These inputs have helped us shape an emerging perspective on how we can catalyze growth and return to the levels of economic performance that we have seen throughout our history, rather than what we have experienced in the last 2 decades. I also want to thank Secretary Sidre of the Department of Economic Development and Commerce and Governor Pierluisi for their partnership in this effort to date. We appreciate Propósito as a strong foundation for this plan, instrumental in the insights gathered to date. We expect that this plan will continue to build from those efforts. We also hope and expect that the plans from incoming administrations will provide similar contributions to our shared growth objectives. This economic development plan is well underway, with significant work left to do to advance our goals. We recognize the imperative this plan must respond to, and we take with great responsibility the mandate to advance this plan. We look forward to moving towards action and delivering real results to recatalyze economic growth across Puerto Rico. Thank you.